I'm Julia from Family, and we're here at Nursery World 2023. I'm here with Dr. Sue Allingham, who is an independent consultant with Early Years Out of the Box, and Sue has agreed to sit and answer some questions for us. So thank you, Sue, and welcome.
And thank you very much for inviting me to do it.
So welcome, you're so welcome. So tomorrow, you're going to be talking about transitions. We know that they're important in the early years, but can you put a little bit more meat on those bones? Why are transitions so significant for younger children?
Right, it's really interesting, and it's more than probably 20 minutes worth of talk. And the talk I'm doing tomorrow hits it on the spot, I think, because it's called Why Am I Here? And it's been several years now since I became interested in the idea of transitions. And the thing that sums it up for me is that transition isn't an event, it's a process. For example, all of us here today went through several transitions to get here. It's train strike day, so some of us had to work out those transitions perhaps in a way more than we might have done previously. But because we're adults with however many years of experience, worldly experience, knowledge of things, looking at things, reading signs and that kind of thing, we can develop strategies to get through it. And it still will possibly be a bit stressful. But because we're grown-ups, we think, well, it's okay because I get on this bus or this train and I'll get there. But when you're only somewhere between the age of birth to 5, you haven't had this worldly wealth of life experience to base stuff on. You don't know that you're going to get on that bus and end up in that destination, but somebody else does it with you for you. And the whole nature of transitions when you're very little is that somebody else does it for you. And I remember very clearly thinking about this when my eldest children, well, all my children in fact, but particularly my eldest son, I just had my second son when I started to take my eldest son to playgroup to drop him off. It's a very long time ago now. And I remember so clearly walking out of the room with my newish baby in my arms, with my eldest son dragging on my leg as I left. And that was before I knew anything that I know now. But at that point lodged in my head, this transition is tricky because I felt bad too. So basically, it's not an event, it's a process. You have to coach the child in a way that perhaps you might have to coach the family as well. I mean, you will know that I talk quite a lot about transitions. A very key transition for any child is starting at a setting, which I learned obviously with my eldest son. And it's about, they might not understand that they're going to this place and then mummy's going home, but they need to know that mummy or daddy or whoever drops them off is keeping them in mind and they still exist. Because when you're very small, you've only been on the planet a matter of months. If your carer leaves, another adult saying to you, don't worry, mummy will be back in a minute, is no good. Because how long's a minute? You don't know. So you need to know that those other adults keep you in mind and are still there for you. And the adults that work with you need to be able to reassure you, to regulate how you feel about things, to have those photographs of family, to say, look, mummy is still here. There's pictures of mummy. She understands you. She knows you're here. She is still in the world. She'll come back for you. An absolute classic is coats. Very new children to settings sometimes don't want their coat to come off because their coat is something that means that they can still go home. But if they do take their coat off and then they're encouraged to put it back on to go out to play, they think they're going home. So it's all this understanding what it means when you have very little life experience.
To me, that's very interesting because I hadn't thought of the transition as something that is a process, as opposed to, we do tend to think of it as, well, we move from nursery to school, and that's one thing that happens on one day when you start or finish, or I think that's a really nice way to reframe our thinking about it. Is there, I mean, you've explained there about showing pictures of parents, for example, when they leave. Are there other ways that we can demystify those transition periods for children?
Well, there's a limit, obviously, to how much we can demystify it, because it's about words and children don't necessarily understand the words, but it's making the process as clear as possible to even the youngest children. So I don't want to use the word simple, but I'm going to. It's not the right word in this context, but even the youngest babies get put into day nurseries. And day nurseries are lovely places, but they're the places that the adult's chosen for them. The child themselves hasn't chosen that setting. So it's as many transitional visits, if you like. It's about the setting that's receiving that new child, being open to the families. Because particularly if it's your oldest child, like my experience with mine, it's the first time you've left your child anywhere for a length of time, other than with someone who's a member of your family. So nurseries and settings and schools, to an extent, need to be very open to those families being anxious as well. I am quite concerned by the number of schools and settings that since the lockdowns have still held on to the practice of the parents leave the children at the gate or at the door and they don't come in because the school or setting feels it's easier. I have a phrase I use quite a lot at the moment is, whose agenda is it? Who is it easier for? Now, it might be easier for the adults in the settings or the schools because they don't want lots of parents in their environment. And I get that, I do. I've been a teacher, I understand. But actually, that adult might be a bit nervous about that child being in that setting. And they might want to just walk through that door into that room and know that child has found its secure place. And it's the same with the child. And that secure place needs to be somewhere familiar. So thinking about even the youngest children, those transitional objects, even with the new babies or the 6 month, 9 month and a year old babies, do they take something from home that's special to them, that they can still smell home on? And the older children too. I've had reception class children bring their favourite teddy or their rabbit from home because it's that connection. So it's not just those family photographs or something that represents them. It's their little transitional object as well. And if we think about it as adults, how many of us have a transitional object? It may be a piece of jewellery. It may be something we keep in our bags. And if we've gone away from home without it, we feel very insecure. If you go out without your earrings in, you suddenly think, or without your watch on. It's that whole security blanket thing. So is there a little piece of home that the child can identify with, even if they're new babies that don't have that verbal expression yet? Is that adult able, in the setting or the school, able to reflect maybe a nursery rhyme that mum does at home or the family does at home? Are there some words of that child's home language that are introduced? Is that child's pet family name used, if they're allowed to? That kind of thing.
I think that's lovely, and I love the example you gave there of how we do the same thing as adults, because I think it's certainly made me think, and I imagine that it's made a lot of people watching think, because we do that as grown-ups, and often we can hold children to higher expectations or account than we hold ourselves to. So when I think about the things I leave the house with, I always have my rings on, and to know that we do that as ourselves as adults, it's easier to empathise, isn't it? And we can allow children the same grace, the same security. I think that's really nice.
Well, it's that connection, isn't it?
Yeah, that's lovely. Continuing actually talking about kind of supporting settings, as a consultant, your company is early years out the box, so you're visiting settings. Where is it at the moment that settings are looking to you for support?
That's quite an easy one to answer in a lot of ways. The reason I'm called out of the box is because I have always been known for, and this is why it was coined about me, I've always been known for unpacking guidance, unpacking policy, unpacking latest thinking, latest ideas, unpacking them from the box and then putting them back in an order that makes sense for the children in the settings. So a lot of the last couple of years for me have been very much about unpacking the revised statutory framework and all the implications that come with all of that. Because yes, it did kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and bring in new terms that perhaps we weren't necessarily that familiar with using in our practice. However, if we unpack it, And we find that we've still got the overarching principles, the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, which are still statutory, and that we've still got the educational programmes, albeit slightly differently worded with new early learning goals. We actually still have a curriculum. The early years foundation stage education programmes were always our curriculum. So a lot of the stuff I've been doing over the last 2 years has been unpacking that for people and then putting it back into an order that makes sense. So basically, I would say a lot of teaching and learning stuff, a lot of working with people understanding child development. And it kind of all meshes together, even with the transition stuff, understanding that those very young children see you as their leading person, if you like. We are, after all, in loco parentis, and they look to us to know the way, and if we don't have a clear vision of what the way is, then it's not going to fall right for the children. So that's a lot of what I've been doing. A lot of child development-y type stuff, a lot of using Birth to 5 for unpicking child development and looking at the whole child and looking at a pedagogical approach, if you like, an informed way of teaching. And I call everybody teachers for that reason, because the minute the child comes to your setting, childminder, nursery, preschool, school, qualifications, no qualifications, you are still a teacher. So it's been that kind of thing for me for the last couple of years.
It's really interesting, and Sue did a wonderful family session on curriculum, which you can find on our website. But in regards to curriculum, do you feel that settings are still looking for that support in regards to, like you say, picking the guidance apart and putting it back together for their unique cohort?
Yes, I find the issue for settings is there is such a lot of stuff that flies out through social media. And you would have seen it, I know. And such a lot of, well, Ofsted called them myths. And they're quite right. There is a lot of myth out there about what is a curriculum, about what is planning, about this, that, and the other thing. And people get very confused. And I'm not at all surprised. And at this point, I will always say to them, the statutory framework is your friend. Because actually, if it doesn't say it in the statutory framework, it's not a legal obligation. And unfortunately, with the best will in the world, we know that mixed messages get out there from all sorts of areas. And people get very anxious, and I see them all the time. I was even in one on Wednesday that's very anxious because they have been told a lot of things, which if we pare it back to the bare bones, once we've unpacked it, isn't actually true. So it is that kind of thing. People are still very anxious about curriculum planning. There's a lot of stuff spoken about progression of skills documents, knowledge organisers, all sorts of things which are entirely not a point.
I think what you said there as well is so comforting to settings who perhaps can't reach out to you, because not every setting can have a Sue Allingham. But the statutory guidance is your friend, and that is there to help you.
It's a tricky friend, but it does lay things down in black and white.
I think that's a really nice message as well for settings to come back to, who are feeling a bit overwhelmed and with all that information. This is the one thing you've got to come back to.
Yes. I'm not by any manner of means saying I agree with everything that's in it. However, everything that's in it is the law. Therefore, if somebody says to you, you should be doing this, that or the other, you would be within your rights to say, but hold on, why does it say it in the statutory framework?
I think that's really nice, and that's a nice way to find a bit of confidence amongst the chaos, I suppose.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is we know that at the moment in the UK and in the sector, we're experiencing a lot of turbulence with the cost of living crisis, and also in the sector with the staffing crisis. Again, when settings are reaching out to you, do you find that it's having an effect on the settings you're speaking to or you're visiting?
It absolutely is, because again, I think maybe this is the social media effect as much as anything. And a lot of sites that say, your setting should look like this and your setting should look like that. if anybody listening to this has ever been to any of my live sessions, and in fact, I think there's a film on family of me in Manchester with all my bottle tops.
Oh, I think so.
Yep, that Matt did a while ago now. Nothing I do, practical-wise or resourcing-wise, costs money other than possibly in a charity shop. I have a lot of bottle tops and I use a lot of silver foil and things like that. So my work within settings is kind of based on the premise that an old colleague of mine once told me when we were local authority advisors together, that you can teach anything you like under the sun just from a glass of water. So that's how I tend to think of things, that you don't need all these fancy pants gadgets, all these fancy pants built-in programs of stuff. You could just do it from a glass of water. So rather than panic that you haven't got the new built-in program for this or the new resource for that, think about how you might do it. This is the kind of flipping the narrative stuff, the out-of-the-box stuff, if you like. Don't spend money on it. Look at what you've got. I say a lot of times, take a step back and look at what you've actually got and take a deep breath. Don't rush off and spend money, because actually a lot of found materials can do it for you. So yes, I see exactly that point. And people are revising their menus around the cost of living and that kind of thing. And the heating is another one. I would argue that possibly an awful lot of settings aren't as physical as they might be. If you are very physical and not sedentary, you're going to be warmer. So it's all that kind of thing. I flip the narrative a lot.
I think that's really interesting, and I have to say that isn't something that I'd considered as well, that more movement means you're going to be,
and
you're
also
gonna be
it's
warmer.
better for you too. I do see quite a lot of sedentary stuff, which is a shame. And the Chief Medical Officer's guidance is 180 minutes of energetic physical play a day. Not all at the setting necessarily, but actually just moving things around in a sand tray or water plate isn't energetic physical. It's that heart rate stuff.
I like that. And that's good advice as well. If you're feeling a little chilly, you can put some music on, have a dance. Yeah,
yes.
Get that heart rate
Get physical, get the parachute out. That kind of thing.
I love that. Our final question, I wanted to ask about what's changed for you in the last few years, having in mind that we have been through an awful lot in the last few years with COVID, now the cost of living crisis. What's changed for you in your practice? Not necessarily related to those events, but what's changed for you in the last few years?
The most obvious change for me is online sessions. Because before pandemic, everything I did was live. In fact, I barely knew what an online session was all about. We all had to learn fairly fast, didn't we? And for me, it's been finding my way into making online sessions as active as I like my live sessions to be. Because I love a flip chart. I love activities for people to do. I get people doing Tai Chi or deep breathing or lying on the floor, and it's all that. And it's very difficult to do online. So for me, that's been the change, to get as much two-way stuff going on an online session. There's also knowing about how to draw people in, how to engage them and stuff like that. But also, on a very pragmatic level, it's about costing things. I am very aware that people can't necessarily afford to buy in people like me. And that's an important consideration. So it's all about those negotiating skills and those thinking about what people can actually afford and the value for money stuff. And I aim to be value for money, which I want people to appreciate what they get from me. And then the rest of it is, what happens.
I really like that, and I think it is such an important consideration, and it's lovely that that's where you're coming from, as a place of wanting to understand and empathise with people's situations. With that in mind, I suppose, are you optimistic going forwards about the sector, about the work that you're able to do?
I get increasingly optimistic, and then every so often something goes and stops it for a minute. I think we are getting to the kind of optimum level now of how much nonsense we can take without it stopping. And there is a lot of nonsense out there coming from all sorts of directions. And I think that there are more people out there with the same kind of voice. I mean, for example, like the coalition that wrote some of the stuff, the voices are getting louder and we are being heard. The driving force is the child development, good, informed, quality child development. And you know from the work you do with family, the people that you talk to and that do these videos, the driving force of child development is getting there. And if we could just get to that optimum level and the tipping point where all of a sudden we have an independent advisory body for early childhood education, we'd have cracked it. And I think it's getting closer. So I think I am optimistic. Things happen every so often that knock me a bit. But the message is there and the message is getting through, I think.
I'm so glad to hear it, and I'm definitely going to be watching this space. This sounds very...
Well, it's things like this. It's things like being able to speak with you as a team that help.
I'm so glad, and I'm glad to be part of it. That's all the questions I have, and thank you so much
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Thank you.